Hello, my name is Lizbeth Rosales,
My name is Brizeth Carrasco.
and today we will be providing a statistical analysis about the importance of mental health and the relationship to other contributing factors. So, what is mental health? Mental health includes one's emotional, psychological, and social well being. It can affect the way one thinks, feels, and acts. Not only this, but it also determines the way one may handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Now, many may ask, why is mental health important? Well, prioritizing our mental health is important because in order for an individual to lead a happy lifestyle, they have to have a healthy well-being. Not only this, poor mental health can lead to poor physical health and the development of chronic conditions. There is many substantial causes for why one's mental health changed. However, the most generic ones are physical or emotional trauma, stress, chronic conditions, or biological factors. Now, why should we address this topic? Addressing these ongoing changes to one's mental health and well-being can be essential in helping those within our community, providing many different coping mechanisms and resources. That is why today my partner and I decided to study the state of Alabama and their average fecal mental distress over a subset age groups, and also look into the different contributing factors that may affect their community's mental health, which are insufficient sleep, social association, and physical inactivity.
Our motivation overall to analyze this topic is because, as you guys know, mental health is a controversial topic since society doesn't really take it into consideration. And most individuals believe that depression is just pure laziness, and others say that we have to think positive in order to alleviate depression. And it also applies to our daily lives because we are college students and young adults are most likely prone to mental health problems since we still can't really balance social and education problems. And we also have to keep in mind that we need to bring into awareness since a healthy well-being equals a healthy mental health. And May is a mental health awareness month.
Our main hypothesis throughout this study is that young adults are going to be more likely prone to frequent mental distress simply because of the stressful adaptations throughout early adulthood and other contributing factors that may impact their mental distress, also known as physical inactivity, social association, and lastly, insufficient sleep. Throughout this project, we have four main research questions. Those research questions are: which age group is more likely to have frequent mental distress in the state of Alabama? How does mental health affect one specific group, such as age? Who is more likely to be affected? Children, young adults, or the elderly? And lastly, what are other contributing factors that affect one's frequent mental distress?
In this slide, it shows the correlation between frequent mental distress and the people who are younger than 18 years of age. On the right side, on the left side, you can see the right skewed weak positive of the graph. And this scatter plot shows that the rate of more teens that are 18 years or younger are exposed to more frequent mental distress. And the average mean for this graph is 21.6 and the standard deviation is 1.63. Then on the right is the regression line equation, and the interpretation of the intercept is that if the population has 0 days with mental distress, then our estimated population less than 18 years of age is 20.21 of healthy days. Then our interpretation of the slope is that for each day that mental distress increases, the estimated population less than 18 years of age decreases by negative 0.11 of healthy days. Then the interpretation of R squared is that 1.98% of the variability in frequent mental distress is explained by the population less than 18 years of age.
In this slide, we are doing an analysis over the population over 25. As we can see in the scatter plot, this shows a strong, weak positive correlation simply because as the higher rates of frequent mental distress can be seen around the start of their 20s and the 25s, where as the older they get, the less frequent mental distress they have. When it comes to the regression line, as seen on the right, we can see that for each day that mental distress increases, the estimated population within 25 and over also decreases by negative 1.23 of healthy days. This initially shows that those who tend to have more frequent mental distress are in their early 20s rather than in their 30s or 40s, where 42.30% of the variability in frequent mental distress is explained by the population 25 and over.
For this slide, we can see the relationship between 65 and over and frequent mental distress. On the left side, you can see it's left skewed and it's a strong positive. The graph shows that the percentages of 65 and over citizens, and which implies that the older they will get, the more mental distress they will have due to their age. And the average mean shows is 19.1 and the standard deviation is 2.58. On the right side is the regression line. And the interpretation for this graph is that if the population has 0 days with mental distress, then our estimated population for 65 and over is 11.70 of healthy days. The interpretation of the slope is that for each day that mental distress increases, the estimated population is 65 and over, and it decreases by 0.31 of healthy days. Then the interpretation of variability is that 34.49% of the variability is frequent mental distress and is explained by the population 65 and over, which means that the citizens that are 65 and over, which around 70 to 80 are most likely to have mental distress due to their age and due to other illnesses that they have.
Now, after analyzing those different age groups, we decided to also analyze different contributing factors that may have an impact on one's frequent mental distress. In this slide, we are analyzing insufficient sleep, also known as sleep deprivation. As seen on the scatter plot, there is a strong positive correlation simply because we can see that higher rates of frequent mental distress also indicate higher rates of insufficient sleep, initially showing that those who tend to have less sleep are also going to have higher rates of frequent mental distress. This overall averages a mean of 40.3 and a standard deviation of 2.69. When analyzing the regression line, we can see how a population with 0 days of mental distress will have a rate of 6.24 of insufficient sleep. Meanwhile, if our rate of mental distress increases, then the rate of insufficient sleep is also decreasing by negative 0.2, initially demonstrating that 31.04% of the variability in frequent mental distress is explained by insufficient sleep, which initially concludes that higher rates of insufficient sleep also demonstrate higher rates of frequent mental distress.
In this slide, we show the relationship between frequent mental distress and social association rate. On the slide, on the left side, you can see that it's left skewed. It's a moderate positive. Um, the scatter plot indicates that the less amount of time of social association, the more frequent mental distress. The average mean is 11.2 and the average standard deviation is 3.50. On the right side, it's the interpretation of the regression line. And the interpretation is that if the population has 0 days with mental distress, then our estimated rate of social association is 18.49. And then for each day that mental distress increases, the estimated rate of social association decreases by negative 0.7, which means that 2.97% of the variability in frequent mental distress is explained by the average rate of social association, which means that the people who don't really have social associations with anyone is most likely to have frequent mental distress.
Now we will be analyzing physical inactivity. Here we can see that there's a moderate strong positive correlation simply because higher rates of less physical inactivity also demonstrate higher rates of frequent mental distress. This overall average is a mean of 31.9 and a standard deviation of 4.59. Now, when interpreting the regression line, we can see that the population who is most often likely to have a rate of 0 days of frequent mental distress will also have a rate of physical inactivity of 12.4, where initially interprets that for each day that mental frequent distress increases, the estimated rate of physical inactivity decreases by negative 0.1632, initially representing that 29.97 of the variability in frequent mental distress is explained by the average percent of physical inactivity. This overall demonstrates that those who have less rates of being physically active will be prolonged to have higher rates of frequent mental distress. Now, after conducting all these analyses, we can conclude that the subset age group who is much more likely to be affected from frequent mental distress will be those around the early adulthood age, initially between the age groups of 20 to 25, before hitting the early 30s. This is simply because they are still adapting to becoming adults. Majority of them are in college, and it can be stressful to manage school, work, and your social life, leading to one to be more mentally distressed. Not only this, we can also see that there is also obvious rates of frequent mental distress between the age groups of those younger than 18 and those within the age group of 65 and over. However, it is more commonly to see them between those in the early adulthood years, but that doesn't imply that those within the other two age groups are not also prolonged to frequent mental distress. Now, when addressing the contributing factors, we can see that physical inactivity, insufficient sleep, and social association all have a significant impact in frequent mental distress simply because the higher one is prolonged to not do them or increase in less physical activity, less sleep, and less social association, the more frequent mental distress they'll have, simply because physically they're not getting their activity, they cannot like de-stress, and then socially they won't have interactions with others, they will not be able like to communicate their feelings. And when it comes to insufficient sleep, while they will be more sleep deprived and they'll get like stressful oftentimes, leading them to not want to do anything because they feel they have too much on their plate. Overall, mental health is a really important topic. So one should really raise awareness on this topic and provide different resources that those within these subset age groups can use to help them overcome their mental distress, or even provide different coping mechanisms that may impact their distress in a positive way, allowing them to feel more relieved and self-assured of themselves.